Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another day of Kaladesh preview cards. Today we have 10 more brand new cards to take a look at, and this set has been very impressive so far. We've had great cards this week, and we actually have some more strong ones again today to add to it. Quickly, before we get started, just a quick reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll see some links for some Amazon products related to Kaladesh, as well as a link to our Amazon affiliate store. If you do see a deal there and decide to make a purchase, a small percentage of that will come back to help support the channel. So thank you in advance for taking a look at that, and as always, thank you to all the patrons on Patreon to help make these videos possible. Having said that, let's get on to the business at hand and jump into the cards for today. First off, we have a card that comes from a Chinese traditional language spoiler. Loosely translated, we think it's Ariel Together, 1 white and 2. It's an instant. Exile a target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Draw a card, and this is a common. This is actually a very effective effect for Kaladesh Limited, I think. I mean, look at all the great Enters Battlefield effects that are in this set. I mean, we've seen a lot of strong Enters Battlefield cards this week, not to mention the mechanics that play well with Enters Battlefield, like Fabricate, for example. We also have a lot of cards that give you energy when they enter the battlefield. We've seen all sorts of things, right? So flickering one of your creatures at instant speed, plus this card replaces itself, all for 3 mana, seems actually kind of awesome to me. So think of it this way, not only can this just be a value play, but this could also be a combat trick for white. If you have a Fabricate creature on the battlefield, your opponent attacks in, you can flicker it and maybe get some more tokens or whatever you want to do to enhance your combat situation. That's actually kind of awesome, right? This is common. You're going to see a lot of these floating around in the draft. You don't want to go overboard with these cards. Like running 4 of these might be too much just because you want to make sure you're getting to your creatures and not just drawing a bunch of these. But running 1 or 2 of, you'll find some value for it. I have no doubt. This is a really cool card in this format. Next we have Fragment Eyes. This costs 1 white. It's a sorcery, another common. Destroy target artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 4 or less. Let's start off again with limited. I feel like this is a pretty strong card in this limited environment. I mean, we've been seeing spoilers all week that are very economically costed artifacts, right? So this deals with them. Okay, it's sorcery speed, but that's fine. It only costs 1. That's pretty awesome, I think. It also deals with some small enchantments, and we haven't seen too many of those, but there's some. We're going to look at one in a few minutes here that was revealed today, which this could deal with, which is nice. So you have that. I mean, this is a card that you might start off in your sideboard in limited, and then you just board it in. However, I would feel comfortable main boarding at least a copy of this. You know there's going to be a target for it in Kaladesh, right? I can't imagine that you would go up against a opponent that's not going to have at least a couple small artifacts in their deck. I mean, even if they're on like a strong creature base, say Fabricate plan or something, then you have like servo tokens you could even hit with it. I feel like there's always going to be something, right? So yeah, I wouldn't mind main decking this. I'd be totally okay with that, and maybe bring in some additional copies out of the sideboard if the situation calls for it, right? Now, this is a 1 casting cost spell, so we should ask ourselves, is this something that's viable in Modern or maybe even Legacy or Vintage? I think this potentially could be a sideboard card. I mean, it deals with a lot of threats that are popular in those formats. I mean, everything from potentially a Chalice of the Void to even a Mox to a lot of the small creatures that you see in Affinity decks. This could see play in a lot of different places, even if it is out of the sideboard. Next we have a card that comes to us from a Japanese language spoiler. Loosely translated, we think it's Night Owl. 2 black and 2, it's an enchantment. When this enters the battlefield, it will have 7 time counters on it. At the beginning of your draw step, you draw an additional card. Remove 2 time counters from Night Owl. Your maximum hand size is equal to the number of time counters on Night Owl. Whenever you discard a card, you lose 1 life. Okay, there's a lot going on here. Now, here's the way I'm looking at this card. In limited, I think this is a fine pickup. I mean, it's a rare, you're not going to see it all the time, but if you're in black and you can pick this thing up, it's eventually just going to give you some card advantage. I mean, look at it this way. It costs 4. You're not getting out to at least turn 4 at this point. Now, you have a couple turns to go before the counters whittle off to the point where you're going to have to discard your hand at the end of every turn. But by the time you get to that point, let's say you probably have, hopefully, maybe 6 mana, 5-6 mana. And if that's the case, most of the time anyway, if you draw 2 cards, you should be able to play both the cards in the given turn. I mean, most of the time you probably draw at least 1 land and one other card, right? Typically, if you draw 2 cards, as long as they're small enough, again, you'll be able to play them both. Every once in a while, you might have to discard something and take a point of damage, but you know what? You still got the card selection. You got to play the card that was most important out of the next 2 cards. That seems really, really good in limited anyway for me. If it was a little cheaper, I would say that perhaps this could see some play in other formats like Standard, but I think at 4, it's probably going to be relegated to limited for the most part, unless there is some sort of blue-black control deck or something that comes to prominence in Standard, but I'm not seeing that right now anyway in the current meta. But having said that, I'd play it in limited. There was a little bit of a debate whether this card could perhaps be something you'd want a harmless offering or donate to an opponent. I don't really think you'd want to go that route with it, just because even, again, once the counters are off this thing, it's not necessarily a disadvantage. I mean, they may take a couple points of damage, but they're getting card selection out of it, and eventually they're just going to be able to cast 2 spells a turn anyway. It's not going to hurt them that much. It's just going to give them an advantage, and I would really probably steer clear of that type of strategy. So overall, it's an interesting card. I really like the design. It feels a little more complicated than cards they've made maybe in recent years. This has a very old school feel to it. I mean, look at all the text on there. But it's interesting. I do like the design. Next we have Underhanded Designs. It costs a black and 1. It's an enchantment. This is uncommon. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You can pay a black and 1, sacrifice this, destroy target creature, but you can only activate this ability only if you control 2 or more artifacts. Okay, so this is cheap. That's nice. You do have to have 2 artifacts to get the destruction effect. However, if you do, and again, this is the set to do that, you could simply play 2 black and 2 and destroy target creature. That's actually pretty awesome. I feel like that's relatively economical for that effect and limited. And you also have the bonus effect if you don't want to go down that route right away. You could put this in play, threaten that you can blow up a creature, and that's going to make your opponent think about how they're going to play their hand when they're going to play their good creatures. It may slow them down a little bit, and while they're being slowed down, guess what? Every time you play an artifact, you have the possibility anyway, if you have the mana, to ping them and gain a point of life. Seems pretty good. Also notice it does ping each opponent, so if you are playing multiplayer commander or something like that, it works there. So again, I think this is a good limited card. As far as Standard goes, I feel like there's some more economical removal spells. We're actually going to look at one in just a few minutes, and we already have things like Murder right now in the format, so I don't know if this is going to break into Standard or anything, but I think it's a very serviceable card for you in limited. It gets even better if you're running a lot of artifacts. Next we have Dubious Challenge. 1 green and 3. It's a sorcery. Look at the top 10 cards of your library. Exile up to 2 creature cards from among them. Then shuffle your library. Target opponent may choose one of the exiled cards and put it onto the battlefield under his or her control. Put the rest onto the battlefield under your control. This is a rare. Now this is a very dubious card indeed. I'm trying to wrap my head around it and try to think about, like, what can I really do with this? How do I take the variance out of this card? And someone may think of something that I haven't thought of, so by all means definitely put it in the comments below. But everything I think of just feels very precarious. Like, for example, I mean, you could play this card, let your opponent take a creature, and then you could simply flicker that creature and then it will come back to you. Like, for example, Long Road Home and Eldrazi Moon, if you flickered the creature you gave away, it would come back on your side. So yeah, you could do something like that, but again, it feels just very precarious. Another thought is you could fill your deck with a bunch of creatures that have drawbacks and try to force your opponent into taking one of those. But if you're going to do that, I mean, you might as well just use Harmless Offering or donate, right? So it just feels like whenever I come up with something, there's just easier ways to do it. I don't know. I mean, it would be great to be able to take a creature out of your deck and take control of it without paying the casting cost, but the level of variance that your opponent's basically going to get the best out of the 2 creatures just feels really awkward to me. And yes, there are ways to mitigate that, but are they efficient enough? Or are they kind of janky, I guess? But let me know in the comments below if you think of anything. I'm sure there's something out there I'm not thinking of, and I'd love to hear it. I love reading those. As far as limited goes, I think the variance is still a problem, even in limited, where you're dealing with small creatures or smaller creatures most of the time. I mean, your opponent could get your bomb, and especially if your bomb has an enters the battlefield effect on it, like you're playing a Gear Hulk or something, that's not going to feel real good. So I'd probably steer clear there. I mean, there's some fun to be had with this card in Commander. That's probably where it would shine the most, because you're in this weird situation where you might be able to make friends with somebody and have a truce and say, you know what, I'll cast this on you, and then you get one of my creatures, I get one of my creatures, and we're going to attack this person over here, something like that. Eventually you're still going to have to deal with the problem, but maybe you could put some flicker effects in your Commander deck and more time to resolve those in a multiplayer game to get your creature back. So that's another thought. That's probably where it makes the most sense. It's a cool card though. I'm glad they designed it. I mean, it's one of those things that if you open this in draft and it's your rare, you might not be super excited, but at the same time I like that these things exist because they do create just kind of weird situations in different formats, like Commander even. Next we have Welding Sparks. 1 red and 2. This is an instant common. This deals X damage to target creature where X is 3 plus the number of artifacts you control. This feels like a real high pick for me in limited and draft. It's doing a lot of damage in certain situations, but even if it's only doing 3 for 3 at instant speed, I'm actually pretty happy with that. And again, it's a common, so notice again this really strong push of power into the common and uncommon level that we haven't been seeing in recent years in Magic. I do think it speaks to the fact that there's some powerful cards in this set, so there has to be some powerful answers that are much more common than normal, and I think that's what we're seeing here. So again, if you're playing with a lot of artifacts, there's more of a reason to use this card, obviously. It can't go to the face, so that is kind of a drawback, but at the same time, they wouldn't be able to make it a 3 casting cost card if it could go to the face. That would just get too crazy too fast. And could you imagine like an Affinity deck playing something like that? That would be really bad. So this is just fine. I like the design here, and again, really strong limited card. Next we have Cloud Blazer. It costs a blue, a white, and 3. It's a human scout, 2/2 with flying. This is uncommon. When this enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and you draw 2 cards. So you automatically probably are thinking this in some ways similar to Muldrifter. It is in some ways. I do think Muldrifter is still a more powerful card just because the Evoke gives you the option of choosing whether you just draw the 2 cards or get the creature and draw the cards. In this way, if you draw Muldrifter earlier, you still can find value in it. It's not just sitting in your hand waiting, where this card obviously doesn't have that option, but you're still getting yourself an evasion creature, 2/2 flyer, and you're drawing 2 cards for 5. That's actually pretty decent. This feels like this could be a part of a control deck in Standard. Works really well with, say, Spell Queller. So there's this Azorius and or Bant control that you could be playing around with. And yeah, we've already seen some success in control in those colors in Standard, so this could contribute to that. The only awkward part of this card is it does cost 5, so you know it's competing with Avacyn. There's a lot of good cards it's going to compete with. There's just so many strong cards right now in white. So you have to take that into account. This will see Standard play, though, probably sooner than later, but if not right now, most certainly after rotation. But like I said, I think it's strong enough to make it right now. Great card for limited. If you're able to pick this up, and again, it's uncommon, so there'll be a few going around, you'll be happy to play this. I mean, drawing the 2 cards and getting yourself a small creature even for 5 is very economical, and you'll be real happy with it. Next we have Unlicensed Disintegration. It costs a red, a black, and 1. It's an uncommon instant. Destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, Unlicensed Disintegration deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. Okay, so look at it this way. It's kind of like a murder with upside. Granted, you're paying a black and a red and 1 instead of 2 black and 1, and that may in some cases be a little harder to do. However, if you're in like Rakdos colors, sometimes it's actually easier to spend this casting cost than try to find double black. So that's actually kind of cool. I mean, this is very powerful. Instant speed, unconditional removal, and you know what? If you happen to have an artifact, it's also going to do 3 damage to your opponent. That's pretty cool too, right? So I like this card a lot. This will definitely see Standard play. This potentially could see some Modern play, especially in decks that would have some artifacts to get the extra value out of it. But this is awesome, and obviously real high pick, easily probably first pickable in limited. Next we have Smuggler's Copter. 2 casting cost, Artifact Vehicle. This one's a rare, 3/3 flying, and when this attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card, and its crew number is 1. This is a pushed one. This one feels real strong to me. Now I can play some sort of 1/1 creature on my first turn, hopefully. Turn 2, I play this. Turn 3, I'm attacking in with a 3/3 and looting. Yeah, that's kind of awesome. I mean, flying just really pushes this card over the top. The evasion that early in the game, especially for that size, just feels really, really good. This is going to be fantastic in limited, great limited pick. This is one of those cards that I think will cross over into other formats. Again, it's hard to say what Standard's going to look like post-rotation, considering we haven't seen all of Kaladesh yet, but I feel pretty confident that this is a card that could see some Standard play. This could make its way into Affinity decks in Modern, maybe even Legacy, just because it's that efficient. So keep an eye on this one. I think this one will see a lot of play. Our last card of the day comes to us from Italian language spoiler, and loosely translated we think as Dynamo Tower. It costs 3, it's an artifact. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get 2 energy counters. Tap and pay 5 energy, and this will deal 3 damage to target creature or player. This is actually a pretty nice effect, so if you have a fair amount of instants of sorceries, even if you have a few in your deck, you're going to get some value here by having this thing hopefully create a lot of energy. The only thing that's awkward is when it comes into play, it doesn't give you energy on its own, but in the right build, that will be okay. Now, if you're trying to do something degenerate with all your energy, wonderful. This will help you get there. But if you don't have anything to do with it, doing 3 damage to target creature or player is actually real good too. So this is strong for 3 mana. I think this is doing a lot. I realize it only costs 3 because, again, it's not giving you energy directly. If it was, it would have to cost more, I think. But I really like what this potentially could do in certain builds. So if you happen to draft a really strong instant sorcery centric deck, this will be a good piece to pick up. Like, this is the type of card you probably pick up first, and maybe you get it in pack 1, and then you say, hey, let me watch out for some instants and sorceries, and I can really find some value here, and then look for some payoffs for the energy as well. As far as Standard goes, again, this one's a little too soon to call. I mean, we really have to wrap our head around how good the payoffs are going to be for energy in Standard. We've seen a fair amount of energy cards, but there's still a lot more coming, and I haven't yet seen that card that really makes me say, yes, that's what I want to pour all my energy into and just kind of go crazy, at least in Standard anyway. So if that card does show up, though, this potentially could be a card that sees a little bit of Standard play, but like I said, it's a little too early to call. We'll definitely know in another week when we get the full set revealed. So having said that, those are the cards for today. So like I said at the beginning, this set just keeps rolling out amazing cards. I'm very impressed with some of the rarities. I mean, some of these cards at common and uncommon are very strong. Now, even a lot of the cards we're seeing common probably wouldn't have been there in the last couple of years. So this is really a shift in the power level. And like I said, it's probably due to the fact that we have to have more powerful and more common answers to some of these really powerful cards that we're seeing in the set as well. So, hey, having said that, we'll be back this weekend with more content. If there's more cards spoiled, we'll do more spoiler videos. If there's not over the weekend, I'll have some other content lined up. And Monday, we'll definitely have more spoilers, so we will do spoiler videos Monday through Thursday. Then Friday, we'll begin our full set review, and we'll look at all the white cards in the set, and from there, we'll make our way through the full color pie as we always do. So until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality content for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.